Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. My name is Simon Vukelj. I am the Chief Marketing Officer of the Children's Tumor Foundation. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this Advocacy Update webinar. A couple of housekeeping rules before we start. One, we do have closed captioning available, live captioning. So we will type that in the chat so you can see it, but click the CC button at the bottom of the screen in order to access that. Secondly, you can use the Q&A or the chat function to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. We will probably consolidate some questions that sound very similar, and we just ask that you keep the questions relevant to the topic at hand, which is NF research funding and how that works and next steps for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the Children's Tumor Foundation, Annette Bakker. Annette.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning, depending on evening, even depending on where you are. I don't need to repeat that. Of course, we are sad that we have lost this funding, the CDMRP funding for this year. That doesn't mean that we have lost it forever. And I'm accompanied by two very high esteemed experts. On the one hand, Aubrey Rothrock, who is a partner at Squire, Patton, Boggs, and has been a very important partner in securing CDMRP funding over almost the last 30 years. And my dear friend Gabe Groisman, who is the chairman of the board of directors of the Children's Tumor Foundation. What I would like to let you know today is that two things. One, we really want to make sure that young talent doesn't leave the field. So we're working really hard on figuring out how we can make sure that those people that have trusted us and have made sure that they can do their research, we will do everything we can to help you. And both Gabe and Aubrey will talk about that a little bit. The second thing, of course, we're focusing on is on making sure that we get this funding back as quickly as possible. And all our energy is going towards whether we can get the funding back or whether we can get some funding back. And then the next thing I wanted to show you, because I know we've gotten a lot of questions around the funding of the CDMRP and whether that would affect this year or so. What is really important for you to understand is that Simon, can you show the slide for a minute that we put together this morning? Because it will show very clearly that the 2024 funding, which is handed out in 2025, is not affected by this cut. So
give me 1 second. I'm pulling it up.
So I just wanted to show you, in fact, these two calendars that are very different, but that will help you understand what is actually happening. Thanks, Simon. If you can go to the first slide. So the first slide is about the federal fiscal year. So there is the advocacy phase that happens in, for example, we use the example 2023 to 2024 so you understand what's going on. So the advocacy phase is in 2023. The appropriations process will begin and will be in October. And actually, the appropriation will be for the year 2024, so FY24, but then the grants will be awarded in 2025. So in fact, what we're spending this day is the 2024 approved budget for the simple reason that we're not going to spend what we don't know we're going to have yet, right? So that is why this is really important for the audience. So what will happen is, in fact, with the challenges that we have for the 2025 budget, that will affect the grant cycle, which will result in grants in 2026. So that was, in fact, something that I quickly wanted to highlight to you, that no, we're not talking about the grants of this year. But with that, I would like to hand it over to Aubrey to say a couple of words around where we stand and what the potential opportunities are. And then Gabe and Aubrey will talk later about other potential financial opportunities that we are currently exploring.
Annette, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone. As Annette indicated, we are facing a pretty challenging political environment when it comes to medical research broadly defined. With the election of President Trump to a second term, we were aware that there would be a mandate to reduce the size of federal government. And that has certainly played out with respect to the Department of Defense and their congressionally directed medical research program. There was a mandate to kind of have a bottom-up review at DoD of all of the non-core military spending. And as a result, there was a focus on certain reprogramming within the DoD accounts, which obviously impacted NF. And this is not just limited to the Department of Defense. There was a Washington Post article just this morning on some of the challenges at NIH with respect to reductions in medical research funding at that agency. So with specific regard to the most recent FY25 appropriation cycle that Annette really summarized well, there were stark disagreements between Republicans and Democrats on federal funding priorities, and that required Congress to enact what is termed a continuing resolution. So they essentially could not come to an agreement on a new FY25 appropriations funding bill for the Department of Defense. So as a result, this continuing resolution, called a CR, will fund the federal government at its current level through the end of the fiscal year, through essentially the end of September. Now, within that CR, there was a reduction in the CDMRP account from $1.5 billion to $650 million. So a very significant reduction, essentially a 57% reduction. And that savings was then reprogrammed to fund the operation and maintenance account for TRICARE, which is the major defense health program that services the needs of veterans and their families. So again, there were larger political dynamics at play that required this reduction. In addition, the House and the Senate appropriators sent a directive to the CDMRP as to which of the specific disease research accounts would be fully funded. Unfortunately, only 12 of the 35 CDMRP accounts will receive direct funding for this year, and NF was not one of them. Now, it's important to note that no level of advocacy really could have prevented this result. These were unique funding and political pressures that Congress had to respond to. We have been in constant contact with decision makers in the House and the Senate, and they informed us that these reductions were unavoidable to meet the fiscal targets. So I also will note, as Annette is very well aware, neurofibromatosis was included as one of the disease areas, along with a list of many other disease areas, which could be eligible for the general peer-reviewed medical research account for FY25. And that's $150 million that these disease, specific disease areas would have to apply to get grants. Now, obviously, that's not nearly as favorable as having a direct, dedicated NF funding line account as we have had historically. And in fact, before the CR was enacted, we had $25 million approved in the House subcommittee bill. But again, the CR kind of trumped everything and put us in the situation that we're in now. So that's the FY25 process. With respect to the FY26 process, that's just beginning. And we have every reason to believe that we can be successful in restoring full funding of the NF account going forward. And in fact, several senior members of the relevant House and Senate committees that direct DoD medical research funding have recently indicated they will make every effort to assist CTF and the larger Defense Health Consortium community towards that goal. So again, we're hoping that this year will be an anomaly and that we will get back to the regular appropriations process in which we have been very successful thus far. But again, we're in a very challenging political environment, and we're going to continue to push as hard as we can to get this funding restored as we go forward into the next FY26 cycle. So with that, Annette, I'll stop and see if there are any questions.
We do have some questions coming in. Just give me a second here. A couple related to research specifically. One from Taylor Sunby, another from Thomas Durrett. So this is probably more for Annette. For multiple year CDMRP awards applied for in fiscal year 24 are all years, for example, 3-year grants appropriated in 2024, or are these awards at risk of running out after funding of 1 year into the project? And then Thomas Durrett asked a very similar question. So if it's a 3-year.
Yeah, so basically when the grants get appropriated and get selected for funding, that is the entire budget for the entire duration of the grant that is being accounted for right away. So that will not stop. The only program that is at real risk, and Gabe and I are working really hard to figure out what we can do here, is the Clinical Trials Consortium. So the Clinical Trials Consortium, for those of you who don't know, has been a very unique program, and I think that have also made us very attractive when we go on the Hill to further advocate for CDMRP funding in the past. But the Clinical Trials Consortium was a $25 million grant that was a 10-year grant. And in order to avoid that we would spend 25 million in year one, the review committee actually decided to split that over the 10 years, $2.5 million per year that would be allocated to the Clinical Trials Consortium. Now that is the one that is at risk because of course, this was funded 2.5 million by 2.5 million, not thinking that we would ever lose everything below 2.5 million, but that is in fact the part that we will need to figure out how we secure that money because there was 3 years paid on that grant and there was still 7 years to be paid. So that is going to be an important fundraising activity to make sure that that consortium doesn't stop.
And then another related question. So the consortium, like you said, there's the challenge and the risk there, but on the actual grants themselves, we have another Jean-Philippe Brissot. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name. How likely is it for a fiscal year 23 grant that the full award will be honored, payment distributed also in 2025 and 2026?
So I think this is something that you can always contact the NFRP program director to make sure that I understood this right. But what I've always understood being on the integration panel is that the entire sum of the grant is allocated at the moment of approval. So that will not be touched because that was from money from 2023 actually. But that is something that, to be absolutely sure, contact your program director. But that is what I've always understood, that the entire grant was in fact allocated at the moment of approval.
Excellent. And we got a thank you from Taylor Sunby. Question, Courtney Marshall. I learned from a congressional aide that the NINS, NDS at NIH funding was extended the same level as 2024. Can we explore getting more of this funding earmarked for NF? I guess it's a question for Aubrey.
I think the answer is absolutely. And again, we had historically been focused on DoD because again, the value of having that dedicated single research account, which Annette, I think is still the largest single source of NF research funding to date. So, but with the political environment we're in, Annette, Gabe, and I, and Simon, we're working on other strategies to make sure we can identify every potential source of the federal government. So the answer is yes. Thanks for your question.
Just this is probably for Aubrey as well. Since it's the DoD, was the funding cut or was the money redirected towards weapons of war?
Well, there was a general funding cut, but with respect to the defense medical research funding, it was reprogrammed internally to go to the TRICARE system, which is the major medical system that funds healthcare for veterans and their families. So it wasn't cut as much as it was reprogrammed to other fiscal priorities within DoD.
But healthcare related priorities.
Correct.
I'm going to bounce around a little bit in the Q&A, but I promise we'll get to as many as possible. But just grouping them together in topics. What items are up for negotiation? Is it only the percentage of funding or anything else?
Well, of course, our goal is to restore the full $25 million going forward in the fiscal year process. So our message going in, and we're going to conduct those congressional meetings starting this week and for the rest of the year to restore the $25 million account that was awarded in FY24.
But maybe also very quickly mentioning here that Gabe and I and Aubrey are working really closely also to identify other potential opportunities for funding. We're not there yet, and we don't want to promise anything we haven't done, which is what we never do. but we just want to tell you that we're really in the exploratory phase here, and that Gabe has done a ton of work here to identify opportunities.
We do have a question, maybe somewhat related to that. What percentage of NF funding comes from CDMRP, both US and globally? So what piece of CDMRP in terms of overall NF research funding?
Well, I can tell you for the last few years, so the funding for CDMRP went up from about 13 million 10 years ago to 25 million now. So that is about 25 million. There was, looking at the statistics this year, there was about 73 million that was coming from the NIH. And then, of course, we have the major NF funders plus all the other funders, but the biggest funders in NF research in the US are the Gilbert Family Foundation, NTAP, and CTF. And we are, let's say, comparable funders. And then, of course, there is money from the European community, but that was about the 26 million 3 years ago, and we're now applying again for a grant in Europe. So we're just trying to figure out where we can find the buckets of money to make sure that we keep funding NF research. I think the biggest value that we always, let's say, expressed towards also Congress and Senate when we would talk about CDMRP is that there was this dedicated strategic investment congressionally directed towards NF. And as you saw in the podcast that Gabe and I did together, it is really important for Congress to understand that if they invest in NF, they actually will help also the cancer community. So we're making as many points as we can, and if any connections you have, please, let's all sing the same song. And I also want to use this as an opportunity to invite everybody to stay united. It's really important. I've had very heartwarming calls and from everybody, independent of what their backgrounds are. So, as I said, let's please stay united to care for our loved ones. And maybe, Gabe, you want to add a little thing to that as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll just jump in. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's heartwarming to see over 200 people participating in this, because this is something so important to all of us. The only thing I wanted to add to what Annette and Aubrey said is, our goal isn't just to restore funding to that level, but my goal is for it to increase. And that's really one of the hardest parts of this setback, and it's as serious as it comes. By the way, for everyone to know, I have a daughter with NF1 as well. Most of us that serve on the board have a family member affected, so it's as personal as it gets for us as well. So drive and intent should be a given. But one of the parts that was difficult for this was that we were right on the verge of exploding our funding to higher levels, right? From so much was happening. We had so much energy behind us. We still have that energy behind us. So we have this setback, but I just want the people on this call to know that we are working night and day to try to find more sources of funding, to be more creative, not just in the federal government, but in state governments, to partner up with you all. If you guys work at universities or lead university programs, expect a phone call from us to try to figure out how we can explore looking for funding also in the local government. It's not instead of the federal funding, it's in addition to it. So we're going to use this to try to push forward. I do suffer from being an optimist. So I'm also a realist. This is a difficult moment for all of us in our community, but we are going to use the energy of this moment to try to propel us forward. And any questions anyone has, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm not so hard to find online. I'll even put my email on the chat with pleasure.
I'm going to group a few more questions in here. There's a lot of questions related to what people can do, but we're going to get to that in a second. We do have, coming back again to current funding. So we have one question that says, are we confident that the government will honor past grants that were properly authorized as opposed to new annual funding? And then somewhat related, I assume that means there's no need for consumer reviewers this year.
No, unfortunately, this year, no. But I'm as optimistic as Gabe. We are not giving up. We will go back. We've had a lot of support from both Congress and Senate in the past around the NF program because I can tell you that when I told them what we were doing, they said this is one of the best run CDMRP programs, and most CDMRP programs should be run like the NF program. So I think we're also really a program that was super efficiently run. And because we are an extremely special community, I've been in very different communities from, neuro-oncology to parasitology to cardiology, but I can tell you that the NF community, don't say no to them. So we will keep going. Please don't think this is over.
No, well said, Annette. And let me just also mention that working with Annette and Gabe and the team, we also were revisiting some of our messaging because, as Annette indicated, the way the NF account has been managed and the resources that have been put to work, and then the results that we have achieved, it is efficiency. And I know this administration is very focused on efficiency. And so we're now trying to work some remessaging of our story to make sure that those who want the federal government to be as efficient as possible, they have a lot in common with our account and our history and our success.
And just to give you an idea of that efficiency, a typical clinical trial in a commercial setting is at least $10 to $15 million. We have been running clinical trials at $1 million, $1.5 million. So just talking about efficiency. And this is because people are working night and day. Clinicians are giving volunteer time. Institutions are committed to help. This is what I'm saying. If I say this community is special, this is special. And that we need to get it back in one shape or form.
Question. What were the factors that you think might have kept 13 diseases to still get funding? What disease has the smallest number of patients? Can you share your thoughts?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And again, looking over the list of the accounts that were funded, let me back up for a second. We have done a really good job as an organization of showcasing the importance of NF research to the broader military mission and the health of the warfighter, the direct relevance to cancer. But in terms of the accounts that were funded versus those that weren't, they even have more direct relevance. So we're talking about Alzheimer's, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, and military burn research. So these are the sorts of accounts that were funded that would have more direct links to the military mission. And so that was kind of the reasoning that Congress took in terms of identifying those which were going to be funded in this environment and those that were not. And I would also remind the group that NF was mentioned as one of the diseases that could potentially be funded through the peer-reviewed medical research account, but that is a competitive grant process. And as Annette knows, that's not nearly as favorable as having the dedicated research account, which we hope to restore in the next cycle.
Okay, we're getting a number of questions from folks. There's a lot, so I'm just going to group them together, just so everyone just consider that your question was grouped into this on what people can do. So it's everything from, and I say, Gabe, thank you for responding to a direct question for someone who has connections to the Trump administration and Speaker Johnson. Gabe's response is to urge them to restore funding. We do have other folks, let's just say from the other side of the aisle, asking similar questions as well about our strategy behind this until now, whether it was to stay out of the crosshairs. Aubrey, if you want to comment.
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, in terms of our advocacy, we are very, very active here inside the Beltway, and we also have had some terrific engagement from the CTF community, from states that are really critical. So I've been very pleased at the degree of engagement. In terms of this administration, I think what we don't want to have happen is for some negativity around neurofibromatosis and the account reduction somehow reaching the wrong person at the wrong time. And again, we don't want to have that sort of reputational risk for our account. And so we've been very careful and strategic as to how we advocate. And again, in this environment, I think that's very important, because we do not want to say the wrong thing at the wrong time and unnecessarily increase our profile in a negative way. I'm
going to type into chat in a second. So people are asking, should they write their congressperson or senator? The answer is yes. We're going to type into chat. It's ctf.org/takeaction. You'll see that there is filled in language just to help you in terms of the message that needs to be sent to them, with a box right in the middle where you get to type in whatever you want to type in. We recommend you type in your story so they understand your NF connection if you have one. So we're going to type that in a second. But so we do have folks asking, is it effective to write letters, and is it more effective to just call the offices? And I guess that's a question, I guess, for Aubrey.
I think both. A letter that Simon has really done a terrific job of putting together is a great resource. And then following up that letter with a phone call or even a visit to your district for a House member, or the state for a Senate member is invaluable. And again, we'd only ask that you let Simon know if you're going to do that sort of outreach, just so we can make sure that we're coordinated here in Washington.
And let's see.
While Simon is putting his thoughts in boxes, I also really want to throw a big shout out to all our NF organization friends, people that have done for years an enormous amount of work in making sure that young adults are trained to represent NF on the Hill, to help us with some of the letter writing. So I just want to say that we are a very united community, and maybe also as an example of that, in a little bit over a week, we will sit together with all the NF organizations to see how can we help, what can we do together to make sure that we help the research community, we put our shoulders under it, and let's use this opportunity. And again, I don't want to sound cheesy, but it's really important. Let's use this opportunity to unite even more than we would normally do, to make sure that we raise the money to fund the research that will help our kids and our adults.
I'm going to stay in one little semi-political space. We have some folks, and again, this is the beauty of our country and the beauty of free speech, which is why we opened this up. People are asking from both sides of the aisle, but there are some questions about, does one party support this more than the other? And I think we've seen support actually from both parties for medical research funding. So Aubrey, Gabe, if you'd maybe like.
So the part of our extraordinary story is that this issue of NF and the CTF mission is decidedly nonpartisan. And we have had success in funding under many different administrations, under many different parties. So I'm very pleased to say that this is not a partisan issue in any way up on Capitol Hill with respect to NF research. Now, of course, the process this year was highly partisan. That's why we're in this continuing resolution posture. But we're hoping that going forward, if we can get back to the normal appropriations process, where we have been really successful historically, with support of both Democrats and Republicans and the administration, I think we can be very optimistic. I share Gabe's optimism in that regard.
A great question here. Probably for Annette. How can researchers who are not federally funded and therefore are retaining their funding, how can they support other researchers in the greater NF community at this time?
That's an excellent question, and also a very nice question, honestly. I don't have the immediate answer. I think it is important to make sure that we help each other, and that if people that are really affected and that are in trouble, how can we make sure that we don't let the great scientists leave the boat, right? I think that is, I think it is up to all of us now to look out for your neighbor and make sure that nobody falls out of the boat that should be in the boat. So I don't have an immediate simple answer, but yes, please help.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that a second. One big concern we have from the CTF family community, let's say as well, is that we lose scientists because there's what hopefully will be a blip in the funding. We don't want to lose researchers from in this space. So if there's a way to keep them rolled into the NF space one way or the other, to include them in your projects if you're looking for new partners.
Yeah.
If they're researching NF, we as a community continue to win and continue to move the ball forward, even if we lose something here or there, but we keep them in the space. A big concern is we lose them.
And related to that, we have a question from Stephanie Booley. At some institutions, there's currently a hiring freeze, which has made promotions uncertain for postdocs who will be quote unquote too old. For postdoc designated grants from CTF, will there be other opportunities ear tagged for early career scientists who have not received instructor, assistant prof, et cetera status?
But that is exactly that's going to be the topic of the conversations that we have with the other NF funders. So we have a meeting scheduled where everybody will come together and we will see how we can help. As you can imagine, only this year we had triple the number of applications that we normally have for the Young Investigator Awards and the DDIs and the Clinical Research Awards. I just want to make sure that the people on the call here understand that I consider it our ethical obligation as a foundation to make sure that we do everything to get treatments as quickly as possible to patients. So we will invest in research, because if you don't invest in research, there is no pipeline for the future. But we will definitely be looking at things that can help our patients and our loved ones as quickly as possible. And of course, we do that with the patients, not for the patients. So that is, in fact, our ethical commitment, but that doesn't mean that we want to drop everybody else, right? So we have just also our limitations. We are unfortunately not that rich.
Somewhat related to that, someone's asked, do we have a list of at-risk research and researchers? Is there a possibility to force rank and focus on funding through private resources, which I think is what you were just talking about, Annette, a little bit.
Well, I think it's important to share those lists, because we are really looking, of course, and we don't know everybody personally, but as I said, our focus will mainly be just ethically speaking. We don't want to drop the patients and the donors that have believed in us so far, to make sure that we are really focused on getting treatments.
This was answered earlier, but I think someone just came in later. If you could just answer again, how immediate is the impact of the lost CDMRP funding? Does this year's allocation cause immediate job losses or research project halts?
That is a question that is, if I can be honest, is difficult to answer. We have an idea of what is happening in the community, but that might be a roundtable at the conference to discuss that, and figure out what we can do.
Just going through the list here. To what degree might it make sense to align strongly with other rare disease advocacy groups? So we can say, as Annette said earlier, that we are partnered both with other NF organizations, and there'll be some very important meetings coming up very shortly. And we do talk to each other regularly, just so that no one's mistaken. And then Aubrey, if maybe you could talk about the Defense Health Research Consortium.
So many years ago, Annette and I recognized the need to have a more formal coalition. We had been working informally among all the rare disease groups. And again, we wanted some structure and formality around that. So we worked to help create the Defense Health Consortium, which now I think has over 100 members that actively advocate as a group for CDMRP funding. So this group has been very important in kind of delivering the larger medical disease research messaging. And of course, we do our own direct advocacy to support NF. So we do have that coalition. It's very active, and Annette and I coordinate with them on a daily basis.
And we're also participating in rare cancer efforts.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some Rare Cancer Alliance that is being set up that I'm a part of. So we're trying to connect as much as we can in order to help each other out and make sure that things don't halt.
More questions on outreach. So we have one person asking, should there be a specific push to the rare disease caucus members within Congress? And another asking specifically about Congressperson Ederholt from Alabama. And maybe Aubrey can talk about how the committee.
Sure. Obviously, Congressman Ederholt has been supportive. He's a member of the House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. We have worked with his office for years. Yes. So any specific relationships that you have that can be brought to bear there, in addition to what we've already done, would be terrific. And we're always looking for opportunities to partner with other caucuses on Capitol Hill. And that's going to be, as Annette indicated, more important than ever to work collaboratively and make sure we bring every potential resource to bear.
And maybe just to answer Margaret's comment, yes, this is devastating. Of course it is. But it doesn't mean that we're going to sit here and cry, right? That is the thing. I always say that you get bad news, you don't sleep for a night, you cry for a week, and then you get up and try to find solutions. So we're now, in fact, in the solution mode. We're looking for alternative funding opportunities. So yes, I'm not happy with this, but nobody is, I guess.
A few folks asking about the NIH, so I'm not sure how much detail we can have here, but in that vein, we've heard rumors that NIH may do away with early investigator status, which will make it more difficult. Any thoughts on how CTF might influence those outcomes? And someone else asked for the 73 million, if we had that list, and would we be able to make that available?
The 73 million was something that Teresa Miller, the program director from the CDMRP, showed us the other day at our vision setting meeting. So I don't have the details of that. Before, there was this federal grant reporter that you could just go in and check it out. That reporter is not there anymore, but there is still dimensions. So yes, this is information that we can have. I think the most important now is not so much to look at what we are fighting for, but looking forward and see how far can we come with the gap that has been created. For the NIH, we're definitely, the Squire Patton Boggs team is trying to get me in front of the Health and Human Services person. So yes, we are trying, but we will first need to see if once the NIH director is in place, which I think he's now voted on, I think we need to get meetings and talk and figure out where we are going, because it's all a little, for the moment, it's not so clear.
Maybe for some level setting, someone just asked, what is the CDMRP? And someone else asked, what was the original rationale for NF research being in the Department of Defense? So maybe Aubrey.
Well, I can obviously the congressionally directed medical research program, and the short title is CDMRP. And again, the defense industry has had a long history of funding health research, dating back to the turn of the century, in fact. And when I first started working on this, the CDMRP was a fairly small account. And if I recall, Annette, the original grant for NF was through a specific member who had a relationship with a family that was impacted. And I think the initial funding level was somewhere between $3 to $5 million. When I started getting involved in 1997, we were able to increase that amount. But the Department of Defense has had a long and rich history of health research. And it's a good place to conduct the research because it's very efficient, and they obviously have the resources to put to it. So that's why it's so critical that we preserve this funding through DoD going forward.
Good question. And again, pharma and biotech speaks for themselves, but what is the stance of biotech and pharma communities with respect to the cuts? Are they willing to support research or people outside of clinical trials?
Well, the biotechs, as everybody knows, they're not in a perfect place either. If you look at after COVID, the investment community has taken quite a bit of their risk appetite back. So we're back into the pre-COVID situation. So the biotechs are not in a perfect place to support research, even not supporting their own research. So I don't see the biotech space moving quickly. I think the larger pharma, yes, we are spending a lot of time talking and convincing the bigger pharma companies that NF is a good application, but NF is still a rare disease. So we're trying, but this is, it's not a given, let's put it that way. They're mainly interested, as we all know, in the applied science and getting drugs to the market. So in the basic science, maybe through the pharma foundations. What we do know, though, and this is something more like a plea to everybody on this call, is that we know there is 170,000 people expected with NF in the US, and we have a relatively small donor base. We have about, we have 46,000 donations at the foundation on a yearly basis, but there is, I think there is more donors out there that potentially could even help with funding this gap. And there is maybe also an opportunity to reach out to those people if there is other help that we can get to further fund this gap. And of course, never underestimating the amazing amount of help that we have received from the volunteers and all the donors that have believed in us for all those years. But, there's maybe an opportunity here.
We're getting a number of questions, and then I want to get to Margaret's very good question here too, but a number of questions on reaching out to elected officials outside your district. And is that effective or not? Should people be writing or calling folks like a top 10 list of here are the folks we need to be targeting kind of thing? Or is it just more effective to stick with your own representative and are people you potentially know, even if they're not yours?
Ideally, it's best to leverage a constituent relationship. If you live in that district or that state and you have that direct relationship with a member who represents you, that's ideal. Not to say that we have not also had individuals weigh in with decision makers who might not be their constituent representative or senator. And again, we are open to all strategies, but for the most part, it's better to have a constituent relationship because that member will be more responsive and willing to help.
Aubrey, Rick asked the question about the leadership, the CDMRP leadership. Which politicians are in charge?
Well, it's really Annette, the leadership of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, and that's Senator McConnell on the Republican side in the Senate, and then Senator Coons, who's the Democrat leader of that subcommittee in the Senate, and then you have Hal Rogers on the House side. So again, we know who the decision makers and the players are, and we engage with them on a daily basis. But again, this political environment is, I hope, anomalous, and I hope we get back to the regular order as we head into the FY26 process. But again, it's really the appropriations subcommittee members who make these decisions.
So the reason why Rick is asking is that if any one of us have relationships to them, so it might be interesting maybe to circulate the names of the people that are really in charge and it could potentially help.
Yes, I mean, we can circulate to the group of a member of those subcommittee rosters. I think that might be helpful for specific individuals.
Absolutely. And I see someone here is asking, is it helpful to post about the funding cuts on social media? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So please, follow Children's Tumor as well as the other NF organizations as well, and share what folks are posting, and then obviously connected to your personal reflection or story where appropriate. We make as much of this content available and easy and pre-written for you as possible. So if you have questions, just let us know. We're happy to put it together. We have a great question here from someone saying, how can we help from Europe? How can we support you from Europe? I don't know if Annette, if you want to talk about our activities in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, so from the European side, we have been looking at which grants are out there from the European community, and we're actually applying for one now. We're submitting at the end of April. But what would be very helpful is to somehow activate maybe the European philanthropists as well, which I am not so aware of. But that would be a good starting point as well, is maybe to see if we can motivate the philanthropy community. And again, to have the NF organizations come together and see what we can co-fund to make sure that the great research will never stop.
And to that point about
a parallel call with the European NF organizations that are willing to talk and willing to help and see if we can build something on that side of the pond as well. I think it's really an opportunity to come together and fight together.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just to that point about NF research never stopping. So we do have a very sincere question about what message can you give to the members of our community who are living in fear that the cut in CDMRP will kill them. I am living in fear. I have NF2. I literally can't sleep. So if you could respond to that.
Yeah, one, the way I want to look at this is that this is going to be a 1-year hiccup and that next year we're back. I don't think we're giving up on this funding, let me be honest. It's not how I was raised, and it's not how any of these people on the screen that are with me are functioning. So that's the first thing, that we will be fighting and figure out a way to raise money. For the people that have NF2, we have a platform trial up and running that is run by the PI Scott Plotkin from Harvard. We are negotiating and discussing about 5 new therapies that can go into the trials. So it's not that the research stops. I just want you to make sure that, yes, the research will be, it's devastating because maybe some young researchers won't be able to continue their NF research. But on the other hand, one, we will see what we can do to compensate for that. Two, we will not give up and go back next year.
Yeah, and I'll add as well, this isn't to minimize the hit we're taking this year at all, but just to respond specifically to that question. There's still a lot of great things happening in the NF research community. When you zoom out, not only we have 2 drugs approved, there's almost 20 companies, if not exactly 20 companies right now working in the private sector on bringing treatments to our families and to our kids that we care about so much, and that everyone on this call cares about so much. There's still at least over $100 million worth of research happening annually around the world, and that's just in public institutions and through government funding, without even counting what's happening in the private sector. So there's still a lot happening and a lot moving, and all the advances that's the global we of everyone on this call and beyond, that everyone you're connected to, is still standing and is still moving. Not just standing, it's moving forward. So there is a lot going on. There's a lot still to be positive on about, and on this funding, we're going to fix it. And that's what I can answer to you.
Great. Just going through these. For anyone who's looking for talking points, please just reach out to us, info@ctf.org. We have a wonderful question from our friends north of us, the Tumor Foundation in Canada. How can we help? So
Thanks.
again,
thanks,
yeah.
Desiree. We will be in touch.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll be in touch, or reach out to us if just a lot of questions here about private funding. I think we've addressed those questions about who do I reach out to. We'll make that list available of the committees, but certainly reach out to us if you have specific relationships or questions. I think we've answered. If we've not, please just type into chat that I've not answered your question, or we have not. But I think we've gotten to pretty much everything here. We'll give you, we have another 10 minutes. So a few more minutes if folks have anything else they'd like to ask.
And maybe one thing, while people might be typing other questions, is that although we know that the other organizations that have been affected by this funding cut will do the same as we do, but we're not reluctant on also reaching out to private foundations, to pharma foundations. So we're kind of looking at everybody here to make sure that we identify the funding, or some of the funding at least, to keep the most important research going. And it's exactly what Desiree says, right? It doesn't matter where the research happens as long as it happens. So we will continue to push forward. I just want you all to sleep, but to be active and to look out for opportunities like all of us do day and night these days. So please, let's not get into the, oh my God, let's get into where do I see opportunities.
Great. Again, more private funding questions. I'm going to acknowledge that I see some other topics being brought in here. We're focused on NF research funding, so please forgive us. We're just going to stick on that topic for this webinar. Feel free to reach out directly if you'd like to discuss further. I think we're coming up close. I don't see anything new. If you want to maybe just start doing some closing remarks, I think we're good.
Although I don't really want to get into the politics here, but there is one thing that I think is very important for our people, our government people in the current administration to realize, is that this CDMRP program that they just got was one of the most efficient CDMRP programs. So I think it is important that if the government, for the moment, as we know, is all about efficiency, I think this is an important topic to make, that this is a very efficient program.
For everyone else, please feel free to reach out. Simon put out our email. My personal email is up there. Everyone here knows how to get in touch with us with any questions, anything constructive, obviously, that you want to comport or share. There's no way for us to know everything that's happening in the community unless the community reaches out to us. So thank you so much for engaging. I want to thank Aubrey for giving us his time and his expertise here as well, and Annette and Simon for being a great MC for this event.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.